Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. You can pick them up at artistfirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at artistfirst.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man, and I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And tonight we have a treat for you folks. For all you folks, all you Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea.
Oh, dear.
Oh, my God. We are going to opine on two of our favorite topics. Pain and suffering. and you're going to join us because you're going to listen. You're going to join us in our pain and suffering, but
suffer through us.
You're going to suffer us. As they say, people don't suffer fools gladly, but perhaps they'll suffer us. In any case, we are going to talk about pain and suffering today. We haven't had a show on particularly on this in quite a while. I think this is a very interesting sort of take on it, on the topic, because very few people, Margaret, would say that either of these two things, pain or suffering, have much utility. In fact, I think most people would like to avoid them at all costs.
Yes. People look at pain and suffering as things that have no merit. They are to be avoided at all costs.
Right, and
there is no silver lining.
Right, and you know, it's unavoidable. But when it comes, what you're looking for is, you know, somebody to say, "Oh, it's sympathy," and "Oh, isn't it terrible?" And you don't worry, it'll be over soon. And you're trying to avoid it at all costs, and then you're trying to, try to get through it as quickly as possible. And this is the other thing I think, Ma, that's very interesting about it, is people try to make their lives in the event of and in the post, sort of the aftermath of pain and suffering, as though it had not happened. We will never mention this again. We will fix everything. It'll be all like it's like a cartoon. Everybody at the end of the cartoon is back to the way they were at the beginning. So the arc of the story is, yes, pain and suffering might come, but at the end it should all be erased and everybody should be happy, and it's as though we went through just a little dark cloud, but now here we are back on the other side and everything's normal again.
Well, I think a lot of people believe that religion is like that, or God is like that.
Pain and suffering?
Heaven is like that, where you go through stuff, and then when you die, you're supposed to go to heaven, and it's all taken away. It's all good. And you look at that and you're like, there was a purpose for you to be down here.
There is a purpose. So
are you going to just negate your whole life because this is what you feel, that it should be this way? There's no opening for growth in any way.
I think you're jumping ahead, but that's okay. We're going to jump ahead into the topic because pain and suffering do have a utility.
Yeah.
And though they oftentimes appear unavoidable, the very famous saying from Gautama Buddha was, "All life is suffering." Well, that isn't he a Debbie Downer? No fun at parties, Buddha. All life is suffering. Geez, who invited this guy? But that insight, that revelation, that revelatory flash. What is it? The lightning bolt, as it's called, the lightning bolt of illumination that came to Buddha in that moment was that, yes, all life is suffering, but it's important and it has a utility, and that utility is subtle. When you're a child and something happens that you don't want, either there's a loss or there's your favorite toy gets broken, and there's tears. And you're almost you're inculcated to this idea. Well, we'll make it all better, as though it had never happened. We'll fix the toy, or we'll get you a new one, or mommy and daddy will somehow take away all the pain. And yeah, you as a parent, You want to do that. You're desperate to do that. You hate to see your children undergoing pain and suffering. But yet, all of us, it is beholden on us as parents and as people, but as parents particularly, to both exemplify how to properly deal with suffering, which comes to all of us, how to in essence give a role model, give an exemplar of what to do when something happens that you aren't particularly pleased about. You can't always make it all better, and that illusion, that sort of instinct, that gut instinct of no, don't worry, we'll fix it all, is actually not doing your children any favors, because you won't, none of us will be there every instant of every day. If you are, you're really doing them a disservice. But to make sure that every hurt or any kind of inconvenience or anything that goes wrong is instantly corrected or protected, that's an illusion. That's a lie. And to the extent that you do that to anyone, you cripple them, because then you're not there, or you can't be there, or you're just gone. You're no longer on this earth. You're not in corporate anymore, and something happens. And given no tools, given no model, given no ability to cope, people crumble. You can't, as was interestingly enough done to Buddha, shelter someone their whole life, and then in an instant they have to really be exposed to to actual life. And it can crush people. It can, perhaps, in Buddha's case, it was his pathway, because he was, I forget what you said, he was on his last life, or the prediction or the prophecy was that he would.
Yeah, he had, well, according to Buddhism, you reincarnate. And he was on the very last incarnation where he was supposed to attain enlightenment. That had been predicted to his father, who happened to be king. And his father didn't want him to go into enlightenment because he wanted him to run the country.
Inherit the throne.
Yes. So he basically tried to shelter him from anything that would bring him through to enlightenment.
I believe he couldn't even see old age, right?
He didn't know what old age was.
Right.
He didn't know what sickness was.
Right. Any lack, any want, everything was sheltered. He was completely swaddled. And yet, then, given the, once having had the experience, he could have been crushed. He could have been driven mad. He could have recoiled in terror and retreated back into the cocoon. I never want to go there again. I'll never ever go outside my palace walls again. Perhaps that was, an outcome that his parents or his father would have enjoyed. However, instead, he found within himself, and perhaps because it was his last incarnation, he found within himself the capacity to open up and see, to understand that the other, all the rest of the world that had been hidden from him, or at least not placed in his circle, that the other was him, that he was the other, that he saw himself in the world, and he could see that not only that all life is suffering. That sounds very sort of negative, but not that all life is suffering, but all life needs suffering. Suffering it has a utility, and we're gonna talk about it a little bit, and we have some personal experience with this, but everybody does. And to the extent that you coddle or just shelter people from suffering, in completely, you cripple them. And then to the extent that you yourself reject and pretend that suffering is not there, or that somehow you can buy enough insurance or do enough things or pay enough cookies into the slot, tokens into whatever alms that you want to give, that somehow you'll buy your way out.
Oh, an indulgence.
An indulgence. That somehow you won't suffer, that you don't deserve it. All these are crippling things, and the better thing to do is to both model the fact that suffering comes and that you have only one choice, which is that your choice as it basically is, how will I accept, and then what will I do next? Not to reject it, but to in essence embrace it for that moment and realize that it is just a moment, and then to model that to your children, because that will make them understand that this is not a permanent thing. You don't live there. We've said this many times, and this is a truism. When you're in hell, or when you're walking through hell, don't set up camp. Keep walking.
Don't stop.
And the important thing about this, and I think we'll go into the quote in a minute, but the important thing about this particular show is that the walking through hell is a very important thing, because that's the mechanism.
Yeah.
Suffering is not getting, an instantaneous discomfort. Suffering is learning what to do when the discomfort is enduring. When you have to actually realize that this is your current now. This is your current life. And know that it won't be forever, but it is now, and you have to be there. And it's important. So maybe, I don't want to, because your revelation is really what we want to get to. But do you want me to do the quote?
Yeah.
My voice is kind of lousy tonight. I'm going to suffer through it. I'm sorry you folks have to suffer through it, but I'm going to attempt this. So this quote is from an interesting fellow you may have heard of. His name is Billy Graham. And although he has passed on to whatever reward he has gone to, he's a very wise person. He has an interesting thing to say here. And I paraphrased this slightly because it was a much longer quote, but suffering in life can uncover untold depths of character and unknown strength for service. Suffering tends to plow up the surface of our lives to uncover the depths that provide greater strength of purpose and accomplishment. And here's this very interesting little codifying of phrase here. Only deeply plowed earth can yield bountiful harvests. Billy Graham. I think he really has something there, and it's quite poetic in some ways.
It's one way of, it's an analogy of presenting your experience down here. I guess the best way to approach this is the initial statement. Pain can carve depth into your character in ways that comfort never could. Very simple. But in that succinctness, it's addressing the fact that, first of all, pain, which is the one thing that we all flinch away from, not only instinctual, but it's something that we understand that this is not what we want, this pain that we see. But sometimes pain is unavoidable, whether it's a circumstance or perhaps your physical body has in some way entered into a state of continual pain, different conditions. And when that happens, when pain is unavoidable and you can't run away from it, which basically means it's unavoidable.
Wait a minute.
But many people don't. They think, okay, unavoidable. No. You really can't run from it.
It is what's happening to you now.
And because you can't run from it, your only recourse is to be able to stand and confront it It doesn't mean that you have to beat it into submission, all right? Because people think, okay, I got to confront this. Like, no. You're making space for the fact that this pain is in my space right now, my purvey. How do I handle this? How do you handle chronic pain? Or it can be from loss, or something that it's just showing a lack of.
Yeah, loss, yeah. And emotional pain, people think of pain as being physical, but it's many, many other things besides that.
Right. And just an upset, or you might be melancholy about something or distressed about something. It's wherever your emotional state goes to, because you're encountering things in your world that brings you to this point, this distress. And dealing with that, where you're experiencing all of this, whether it's pain or loss or mourning, upset, unhappiness, sorrow, melancholy, distress, all of it, being in that is called the state of suffering. So, understanding that your reaction to this pain is what brings about change within you. I know many people who basically keep avoiding pain. They believe that this is the only way to handle it. I avoid it. I pretend it doesn't exist. I push it aside. I won't confront it. I will not confront it. So what does that do? Pushes all that reaction into a subliminal level, unconscious level. And you don't even realize the fact that all your decisions are at that point are based on avoiding your pain. You're not really choosing to live. What you're choosing to do is avoid your pain. So why do this?
Well, if you don't mind, I like the point of the avoiding the pain, and it ties very much into what the whole statement. People focus on avoidance of pain, and to get back to comfort. I mean, that's what really this is saying is that your comfort, and we could also say, the comfortable space that you're in, is also a place where you aren't going to be challenged. You're it's an uncomfortable place to do something new. It's an uncomfortable thing to learn. Pain comes in many forms, and even if it's not imposed upon you, merely stating that you never want to experience pain is almost tantamount to saying you never want. You mentioned this earlier. That's why I think it's interesting. You never want to live. Mm-hmm. With the example we gave just a little bit while ago about the child, if the parents spend their every waking moment denying the child's experience because it might cause pain, discomfort of any kind, we want you to always be happy, to never have any form of challenge. Yes. You produce a crippled, really handicapped individual, because that individual has never had the opportunity or has always been shielded from any challenge. So, people think of pain as physical pain or emotional pain or loss, and all these things are extremely important because these are the acute onset of pain. And as Margaret mentioned, the chronic emotional pain, chronic disease, all these things engender suffering. Suffering has a time component. Pain is instantaneous. You stick your hand in a match, in a flame, and pain, you draw it back instantly. It's, ow. But if the pain cannot be avoided, or if the pain won't avoid you, you have to suffer through it, and that requires a certain depth of character. It requires a certain resilience. It requires a certain amount of commitment to living your life despite. But to get there, we all have these let's say much more minor challenges. I'd rather not do homework tonight. I'd rather not spend the time to learn a skill that then I can apply to something I want to do. So if one wants to be very good at a sport, you can say, I want to be this wonderful soccer player, for argument's sake. You don't necessarily understand that that's going to require a good deal of commitment and time and getting up early and spending the time to develop your skills and learn how to play that game and learn how to play it well and realize that, yes, you get some reward from this. Peterson talks about this all the time. You get out of it what you put into it. And it seems trite, but that putting in is, in essence, discomfort. It's pain. It's a form of suffering. You have to die to the moment, to the momentary pleasure of not doing this and whatever, indulging yourself in that, or we mentioned indulgences. If you don't want to suffer for your art, you'll never be a good artist. If you don't want to suffer for your skill, you'll never be skilled enough to be the best at or one of the best at what you do. So,
well, that's Jordan Peterson who had said that you got to start when you start small. You don't go directly focused on the end. You cut it down into steps so that you can see progress being made. It's the beginning of appreciation of process. And it's something that needs to be taught, especially to our young ones, but it's not usually high up on the list. What you were saying before with what parents usually, especially when you're dealing with young children, they just want them to feel good about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And for very young children, we're talking less than a year old, they need to be catered to. They need that, literally, because they are helpless. But the minute they begin to be able to learn different skills on how to do things, it's necessary to help them learn how to be patient, how to try again. And it's not by, like stopping the kid and saying, okay, now you have to be patient. They have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
No, seriously. People
you must be patient.
Yeah. And they've never been introduced to the techniques of learning how to be patient, or what it means to, when they have an emotional incident, where if they suddenly get angry,
mm-hmm.
and the parents are like, no, you have to calm down, you can't do that. It's like, well, they've never been taught by you how to calm down.
Right, just the words are not good enough.
Right.
You have to model it.
Well, if they're watching you, that's usually the first step into knowing how to deal with a situation. And if you've ever watched the little ones, watching the parents or watching the adults deal with a situation, suddenly something happens, and if you watch them, their eyes go very wide, and suddenly it looks like every sense is on in that moment. They've become a giant ear. They're listening very intently.
They're taking it all in. Yeah.
They're watching. They've become a giant sponge. It's like, okay, something happened here. How is my adult taking care of this. You know, like someone gets into a car accident, they happen to be in the car. And they're, you know, initially eyes wide open, a little frightened because, yes, it was scary. How is Mommy and Daddy dealing with this? And if someone gets out there and starts ranting and raving and screaming at the other person, well, that's kind of what you're teaching the kid, because they pattern right in that moment of how you're handling this. It's out of the ordinary. So teaching how to handle pain or discomfort is a major skill that needs to be taught to the little ones, to your children, because they don't know. It's like the first time a child, you know, you're bringing them to whatever sport it is they happen to love, baseball, basketball, soccer, and they're fairly good at it. So say their team goes up in rank, and it's all celebration. Yay, 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 yay. Then it gets to the point where, oh, maybe you can win the championship. And it doesn't happen. And we're talking little guys, okay? 7 years old, let's say, or 8. I remember watching with the rest of the parents group when the kids, they lost the championship. They couldn't get the trophy. They all went into this, oh, it's just awful. I really wanted to win. Mm-hmm. And I remember hearing some of the moms go, oh, it's so awful. How can, well, it's awful, but Dad's the one who's helping, and how can he bear not getting upset? Because Mom was really upset about this whole thing. She just felt awful about it all. And I remember looking at them and saying, wait a minute. This is what you're supposed to be teaching, how to handle a loss. That's what your job is as the adult. This is just a game. And they looked at me like, oh. Because they were so in that moment. They were living through their child, whatever the game was. But they were like, yeah, what are you? They didn't even realize that they were doing this. They got so involved.
And that's what you're saying is exactly right. The opportunity. So, and I think we've got to return back to this statement that you made is perfect for this, because the pain and the suffering is there, and this is the small example. Okay, losing a game, losing a championship, but having a tough loss, and you can do in that moment. There's a loss, there's pain, and you see it in your child's face. You see it in the faces of the children, especially if you've been working with them. All these things.
Yeah, they tried so hard.
They tried so hard, and their little hearts are broken in this moment. And the instinct is somehow to take it all away and make it right, and blame something else, blame this, blame that, blame the weather, blame, and all of that. You know, in that instant of time, you know, the presence of you as the model, as the person for whom they want to get the clue. We lost. It's terrible. What are we going to do? We're bad. And you if you model that properly, you do exactly what this phrase does. You can carve depth into their character. Every win, okay, they won let's say they, like you said, Margaret, they won the whole season. They were undefeated. Every team went down to defeat in front of them. They were champions, riding high. It's like I'm reminded when the conquering generals would come and they feted and they're taking down the street in Rome, and everyone's throwing bouquets of laurels and every other thing at them, and they're being acclaimed as the conquering hero, but to remember in that moment that the important stuff isn't when you win all the time. The important stuff, and this seems trite, but it happens, and it happens in those moments, in those opportunities. There's suffering. The kids are upset. They really, really wanted it. And you did too. You have to admit that to yourself. But you have to be the person there who, in essence, says, yep, we tried our best. The other team tried their best. And in this one contest, in this model of life, there was a loss. There had to be a winner and there had to be a loser. And you can't win them all. And to lose with grace and with your head held high and say, I tried my best, I put everything out there, it didn't fall our way, yet what you're doing for those kids is better than 1,000 wins in a row. One good loss, one opportunity to carve into their character the model of how to deal with life handing you something that is unavoidable, something that you cannot. It's not just a game anymore. It's life and death. It's not just, we're going to get up the next day and go out there and try to win again. No, it's loss which is perhaps permanent. It's loss which is perhaps devastating. Something that you cannot, there's no recovery from this. There's no making it better. Yet, there is, in a way, because if you've modeled the capacity to understand that you are not the loss, you're not the win either. That's not who you are. You are neither thing. Those are just events. And Christopher modeled this, and the kids in the cancer wards modeled this. You're not defined by your disease. You're not defined by your win. You're not defined by your loss.
You're not defined by your pain.
You're not defined by your pain. But what you are defined by is the being, having the experience, having that piece of your character, if you will, because we speak of character, but character is all your sum total of your experiences, and it's interestingly enough, not just the experiences, but how you dealt with them is character. And how you will deal with the unknown is character. And that one loss, and modeling it properly, saying, yep, it hurts. It hurts. You say to these kids very, 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 this is something that which we've seen many times you say, yeah, it hurts. It sucks to lose. I hate it. It's a pain. It brings you down. You want to cry. Okay, cry a little. Feel the pain. Mm-hmm. But realize that you are not the loss. You are not the win. The pain comes. Give it some space. It's like when the kids go have their tantrums. You give it space. Let it. Yeah, really sucks. I hate this. It's terrible. And then say, okay, now I've given this. Let this pain come up. I've let this emotion rise up, and I know that it's not me. It's just the feeling of loss. It's the feeling of pain. It doesn't define me. It's the experience of disease. It's the experience of losing a loved one. But it doesn't define me. I am the being that experiences life. Life, as Buddha said, all life is suffering. All life is, you could say all life is winning. Well, all life is winning and losing. And all life is experience, and it's how you handle it. And that's that. If you can take that opportunity, a loss is better than 1,000 wins. Why? Because in a loss, you can show what it is to live and what it is to be. And wins are easy. They're cookies. They're like, oh man, we'll never lose again. And if you let them think that way, you're doing a grave disservice. But if you say in that one loss that they were trying, the other team, the other people, those people who are really just the same as you, were trying as hard as they can, and they won. It's their time to celebrate, but it's your time to say, we did everything we could. It doesn't define us. In fact, that losing with grace and with strength and determination is in many ways better for them.
Learning that consistent effort towards excellence is what is important. Because there's always going to be someone who's better than you, and there's always someone who's going to be worse than you. But it is your internal acknowledgement that, yes, I did try my best, and I lost this, but what have I learned? Because if you don't learn from your losses, then that pain becomes empty. You're down here to learn. The whole purpose of this is imperfection. So you're acknowledging your experience of imperfection. And there's nothing wrong with that, because most people want to say, oh, only the good things I want to have, only the comfortable things.
No pain ever.
No discomfort. I only want to learn without any discomfort.
That reminds me of someone we know.
Well, that was a running argument I had with a number of people, but that's neither here nor there.
Good friends.
Yeah. To understand that it's a given down here. And it's what you do with the experience that really matters. How you have responded. Has this pain shown you something that needs to be developed within your own person, within your own character? Do you need to learn how to be more patient? Do you need to learn how to distance yourself from a situation so that you do not become swept up in whatever the emotion may be, anger or rage, of course, is the worst.
Yeah.
Or depression. Will you be swept down into this depression? Can you manage? Is that what it's pointing out to you? This is a weaker area for you. You need to learn this. Because when you allow yourself to be swept into whatever this reaction is, you suffer.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That suffering comes from indulging in the avoidance of pain. Okay, that sounds stupid, or it sounds contradictory. If you try to avoid pain, you will suffer. You will be swept up in just the constant attempt to avoid, to never have any pain. Can you imagine trying to live that way?
You're basically putting as a foundation for all your reactions, I am avoiding pain. It has nothing to do with who you actually are. It has everything to do with this mental program you've put in. I am avoiding pain. This is your ego. I'm going to avoid pain. I'm not saying you're supposed to try to find pain for you.
Don't seek out pain.
Yes. What I'm saying is life always brings you both ends of the spectrum. It is your response to it that either builds you or tears you down.
Yeah.
But it's your choice on where to go, whether or not you suffer pain or not. What do you do with this? You lost something. Okay, what did I learn from this? Where can I go with this? What skill do I need to be able to handle this better?
Interesting little phrase there that you went and said. I think that people might stumble upon it. You say, well, you said You know, the what do I need to learn in that moment? As though you have a choice to learn something. And people say, well, I didn't have a choice. It just came upon me. I didn't want this pain. All of a sudden it came. The point is that, yes, you don't have a choice, and this comes down to, again, the ego. The ego always thinks that if I do X or Y or Z, that this won't happen to me, or if I'm good, or if I pay off whatever, I buy an indulgence or whatever we want to do, that somehow it won't come to me. It comes. It's going to come regardless. And so the first conceit is that you have some sort of a choice. You don't. But you always have that choice. So the choice that Margaret just said, you have the choice when pain comes to allow it to carve the depth into your character. And what does that mean? It means that you say to yourself, rather than letting yourself get swept up into the pain and the why me's, that's just trying to avoid it. Why I don't deserve this? They deserve this. They did all the bad things. Why me? I want this to be taken away. I want 100% odds of it removed to me. I want someone else to blame. I want to go find the person who did this to me and make them pay. None of that matters. If you have the moment of the opportunity when the suffering comes to say, why not me? That's the first thing. And what can I learn from this? I can't avoid the pain, but I need to understand what it is that's the root of that pain. The root of the pain is not necessarily the acute thing that happened to you. The root of the pain is your reaction to it, whether you reject it or whether you try to say it should be this one. It shouldn't be me. It's not. It's someone else's fault. It's not mine. I did everything right. All those things they can't get you away from the pain, but they are getting you away from the unique opportunity to learn something.
Well, most of the learning happens after the experience. I want to make that point. When you are going through whatever it is, many times you don't have a moment for self-reflection because you need self-reflection in order to understand what may be lacking, what we might need to learn. When you're in it, all you know is that you've got to keep moving. You can't sit still. I've seen people, they're in this moment of suffering, and they try to stop everything because they want to understand what's actually going on. It's like, if I stop everything, then I'll get it. I'll figure it out. In moments where you are truly suffering, you are in situations where you have no control of what is making you suffer.
and
it's just not possible for you to make it stop. So what do you do when you're in that moment? In fact, I had a conversation today about this. You gotta keep moving. You gotta keep treading water to keep your head above water. You just keep moving, and you don't project so far into the future that you overwhelm yourself. You have enough energy for today, for this moment. Be there. Take it all in. What you anticipate for tomorrow may never be what you anticipate. It may be something completely different. But what you have is this moment right now. And you keep moving.
Very true. I mean, beyond all things, the lesson learned in Sloan Kettering or in any acute suffering is that in that moment you can't stop. We saw it so many times. People wanted to stop and say, "This can't be me."
This can't be.
You know, I want an explanation. I want everything to stop. I need this right now to be put on hold so that I can figure this out. And those are all, you know, good. They're all instincts of the ego, because the ego wants nothing more than control. It wants either somebody to blame, somebody to take it away, somebody to control it, somebody to stop it. What you learn in those acute situations is, in that moment of now, in that moment of pain, the only thing to do is to accept that this is, and that the next moment, the only thing you get to do for this particular moment is react and say, what am I going to do for the next moment? I can't control this. All I can say is how I'm going to react to it.
Well, you choose.
You choose.
You choose. Reaction is many times automatic. You have to have that moment of awareness before any reaction. If you choose the reaction or you choose something else, but the moment that you are in, you must be in your awareness to choose. It hasn't. The reaction is part of a possibility of what your choices are. But you sit there and you go, move.
Right. That's what I'm trying to say. Not the reaction, not the reaction of emotion or the reaction of thought. The realization that this is the moment you're in, that you don't have any control over it. You don't have the why me's. You don't have the who to blames, and that's what you come to. One of the things one of the other utilities of suffering, it says carve depth in your character. One of the other tremendous utilities of suffering is it brings you to the end of yourself. It wears out your ego. The ego initially, if it's a strong ego and very unconscious person, will try to do anything it can to try and push suffering into someone else's fault.
Perfect.
The universe doesn't like me. This one's out to get me, etc., etc., etc. And all that does is reinforce this idea that somehow I was in control and they're trying to get me, and now I can take this, you know, everything has to be about me. Well, suffering, prolonged suffering which you cannot just fix with one little, you know, waving your hands and make somebody else's your fault, wears out the ego. It literally brings you to the end of yourself. It brings you to the end of your illusions. And at that very end, and we went through that with Christopher, and he went through it acutely, and we went through it with him to support him and through our own journeys. In that moment, you realize that you don't know what the next moment's going to bring. All you know is that in this moment, you have the experience, you have the realization that the next moment is unknown, that you have to move into it, and that you, the actual being, is not defined by what's happening now, nor by what's going to happen, which is nothing more than fear, or by what happened in the past, which is nothing more than regret. You are you. You are having an experience right now. So it literally takes you out of, it gives you this amazing, tremendous opportunity, which is what this experience is about, to realize that you are not your situation. You're not your physical circumstances. You're not whatever was done to you, and you're not identified by your suffering or by your pain. That process, which can happen perhaps in a lightning bolt, but it usually takes much longer, brings you into presence, brings you into being. It's Tolle's, you know, destruction of the pain body, which otherwise rules you or can rule you, and certainly rules you if you try your whole life to avoid suffering.
Well, again, you need space to do the reflection. Because, again, we had said this before, people really believe that it should be harmonious. There shouldn't be any negative emotions in their experience, say, raising a family. Oh, no, we don't do that. What matters is keeping the kids happy. You know, it reminds you of, what was it now, Baruka.
Happiness and harmony.
Yes, happiness and harmony.
Yes.
That's what
Baruka
matters.
Salt.
Yes. Yes.
Willy Wonka.
Willy Wonka. Correct.
In case you didn't know the cultural reference, but go right ahead. Sorry.
And just spoiling the child so that all the energy that this little life has is now turned towards, well, I'm supposed to be feeling good about everything. You're supposed to make that happen. Instead of putting all that energy out there and actually doing some good in the world for other people or for yourself or for just in general, learning what it means for yourself to do good. What can I do that makes me really feel good, do good?
Well, and to be a little less selfish and a little more selfless.
To be open to the understanding that your being state is more than whether or not the world around you is conforming to this concept you have of the way it should be.
Mental concept.
It should be this. Like, well, no. You can give your children a real big jump ahead if you can give them the foundation of, things don't always go your way.
Exactly so. These opportunities, and again, the language is lovely in the way it informs. Selfishness is egoism. It's focusing on your comfort and never having to suffer. That's the selfish. That's the way of looking. One way of looking at selfishness. Selflessness is in essence making not you're everybody's doormat that they're going to run on, walk upon, but that you're not defined by what happens to you. Your ego is not your definition. It's still there. There's still an egoic being, let's say, but it's no longer in control. And that selflessness lets you see the other as somebody you can have a relationship with. The other as somebody for whom you can sacrifice yourself, for your children, for your spouse, for anybody that you have a significant relationship with.
If you can have a relationship at all, you need the element of selflessness to have this relationship. Doesn't mean that you get rid of your ego. There's a byplay. That ego is one aspect of who your being state is. Having a real relationship is one soul to another. Now, we've all heard that. Yes, one soul to the other. But it's meeting the person on multiple levels of being, whether it is emotional, and most people say, oh, it's all emotion. It's got to be all emotion. We have to feel good about our relationship. Okay, so we're going back to, the world is only supposed to bring feel-good experiences to me. What about the other person? Does that mean that this is what you're bringing to the other? It's this byplay of beginning to understand what your being state actually is and how it relates to another, whether it's emotional, whether it's mental, whether it's physical, whether it's spiritual, which is the most important thing. Do you have a relationship where your spirit can communicate with the other spirit, what's eternal in the other person? Are you touching the eternal of the other person? There's a question.
Yes, and in any relationship, and maybe this is good to kind of wind this up as we're getting near the end, you will have to suffer with the other in many ways. No relationship is where only one gives and only one receives. And no good relationship is, and no relationship is without some degree of suffering with the other. If everyone were perfect and there was never any suffering in any relationship, there would be no growth, no development, no life in it. And so the pain and suffering of love for the other is part of what carves the character of the relationship and makes you into a different being as that relationship. And now we're at the end of our relationship with this show. But
and just remember, love hurts.
It does.
It hurts.
It can hurt.
And so,
go ahead, you.
On that note, I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
And thank you for hurting with us.
Good. I like that segue.